I'm Mamphela Ramphele. I am at the USB Leaders Angle. We've just had a wonderful conversation on the role of business schools in the social justice program that this country has yet to undertake. It's been a wonderful morning with wonderful young people, and I believe that the future will be shaped by this generation of leaders. For me, what we have is a country with all of what anybody could wish for to prosper, but with a seriously damaged brand. And that damage comes from our failure to use what is a globally celebrated constitution to create a new social justice culture that protects human rights, promotes economic opportunity and development, and supports the rule of law. The drafters of our constitution were alive to the reality that constitutions do not change embedded values and cultural practices. Changing hearts and minds to embrace the new values and cultural practices such as we have in our constitution requires deliberate investments in the change process that is needed. Freedom wasn't given to us. There was a struggle by citizens, the people. Now what we have as we the people is the responsibility to implement the practical transformation programs needed to create a new culture reflecting the values of our constitutional democracy. We need the healing of the wounds of division of our ugly past. Second, we need to establish the values of democracy, open society, with a government based on the will of the people. Third undertaking was to address the quality of life of every citizen, not 50%, not 80%, every citizen. And that is what social justice is about. That's what we said, and that was way back in 1996 when we adopted our constitution. But what we did, and we is everybody, the business community, the government, the citizens, we celebrated, got drunk on euphoria, and checked out. We didn't go back to those 4 undertakings. So like many post-colonial countries, South Africa has over the last 23 years failed to follow up on these commitments. That emotional settlement, it's really important to free us from the past so that we can engage the present. You cannot have political freedom without the freedom from inside, the emotional freedom, nor without the socioeconomic freedom. In a book entitled Apartheid, Britain's Bastard Child, Helene Opperman-Lewis, the author, concludes that, and I quote, "The lack of understanding of transgenerational trauma and the impact of humiliation on nations is one reason why people do not learn from history." And she came to this conclusion having reviewed the reality that the Afrikaners who were traumatized by the oppression by the Brits, when they became the powerful people, they did exactly the same to black people like me. And now we have the majority of the government of today with people who look like me, continuing the oppression of people who look like them. That's how intergenerational trauma works. The question this morning is, are we learning from history as we grapple with our challenges of persistent poverty, inequality, and unemployment, despite all of those commitments we made in the preamble of our Constitution? But how effective are or can business schools be in stimulating transformational conversations in a society so scarred by structural inequalities and low levels of trust between citizens? We have lost the spark, the passion that came with the dream of 1994. We now need to redream, reimagine this beautiful country and ask the question, what kind of South Africa do we, each one of us in this room, want to live in and bequeath to our children and grandchildren? If you read the history, whether it's the US, whether it's Europe, whether it's even this country, the private sector has always been involved in nation building, for better or for worse. To stand back and say the business of business is business is historically inaccurate, but it's also not very helpful. The outcomes of our collective efforts over the last 21 years since the adoption of our Constitution do not demonstrate that we have done enough to execute on the commitments we made as we the people. We have been too afraid to walk the road well less traveled and to start the uncomfortable conversations we need to have to release the potential. The World Economic Forum's Global Technology Report, looking at our performance in education, came to the conclusion that we come last out of the 143 countries that they looked at. And they were using a simple test of math and science at grade 8 level. These results demonstrate the impact of transgenerational trauma, of imposition of poor educational quality on the majority population in order to perpetuate the myth of Black inferiority. Black children and their teachers were told that they are inferior and cannot do mathematics and science. And this is a great irony on a continent where math and science were invented. Business schools have to reimagine their roles of enhancing the capability of leaders in the complex society and the competitive global environment we live in. There is no way we can be competitive as a nation without vigorously tackling the gross underperformance of our education and training system that is stealing so many children's futures. Business leaders also have rights and responsibilities as corporate and private citizens. In the same way that business leaders were able to support and chaperone the negotiations that led to our celebrated political settlement, they can now refocus on complementing that political settlement with conversations that would promote healing and the embracing of values of human dignity, equality, the rule of law, and social justice. The level of mistrust, which is documented being very high in our society, would be reduced. People will be more productive because they'll be connected as people, as human beings. And they would have a shared value base. So issues of leakage, destructive strikes are unlikely to happen. And if you think I'm dreaming, that's how Germany rebuilt itself. They didn't do it so well after the Second World War. They did what we did, just do the mechanics. But after the fall of the Berlin Wall and 5 years of muddling through, they decided they are going to make values-based civic education part and parcel of the school curriculum, university curricula, and workplace development plans. The Gupta email leaks raise very worrying examples of corporate complicity with corruption and anti-competitive behavior. These examples demonstrate the failure of business leaders, including corporates that are meant to be the watchdogs, the auditors, assurers of propriety in the business environment, the McKinseys, KPMG, SAP. They have failed to uphold the very rule of law that we are told is essential for investors to invest in our country. The question is, how effective are business schools in promoting the embracing of values of transparency and honesty in their dealings? I believe it is time for business schools to step up to their involvement with leadership development, not just for the private sector, but also public sector. Effective public-private partnerships are essential to ending the inequalities and to promoting social justice and prosperity for all of us. Let me conclude. We need to draw from the wisdom of Africa to understand that healing rituals are needed after major traumatic events. We need to create safe spaces for healing conversations to support acknowledgement of humiliation and abuse of the rights and dignity of the many by a few. This humiliation was used to justify economic exploitation of indigenous people by colonial conquerors. It was also used to humiliate Afrikaners by British imperialists. All of us had been wounded one way or the other. Even the conquerors are wounded. Ubuntu is a resource to help us to reaffirm that our humanity is inextricably linked. Healing of wounds through the Ubuntu framework enables the conversations that lead the wronged to forgive the wrongdoers who acknowledge their abuses, so that both can link hands and walk together into a shared future as whole beings. Business schools can help promote and stimulate open conversations amongst business leaders, amongst leaders in the public sector, so they can become catalysts of a national healing process, so we can effectively and collectively tackle social injustice and inequality. Business leaders have the opportunity to reimagine both their country and their roles as citizens, so they can be guided by an image of a future they can shape and believe in. Our future as a prosperous democracy needs to be released from the icy clutches of our ugly past. Business schools and leaders they graduate have a seminal role in shaping our future. It is your choice to release this country, this beautiful country, from this icy clutches of the past. And the choice to release or not is yours. Thank you.